I'm really captivated by the words and the haunting sound of the question, the phrase, Mary, did you know? Did you know? And it suggests to me the idea that there is in us a plan, there is in us something that our soul comes into this life experience meant to be and to do. And we may get glimmers of it and know pieces of it, but we don't know all of it until we begin to live through it. To me, that's the divine mystery, the mystery. If you think about your own life and where you are right now, and how you are right now, and what you do now, and where you live, and who you live with, and how you are, could you have figured all of that out years and years and years ago? Has there been any Mary did you know in your own life? I've shared with you, I won't go into the details of it now because it's too long of a story, but never in my wildest dreams, nightmares, yes, dreams, no, would I have ever imagined being here doing what I do, because it was not part of my conscious plan. It's my own little version, if you will, of Mary, did you know? To me, there is in our spiritual journey a requirement that we practice a new kind of trust. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. And that, in part to me, is the mystical and metaphysical message, a mystical and metaphysical, not the, a mystical and metaphysical message of the story of Mary and Joseph. A new kind of trust. To grow and evolve spiritually, I think it does require a new kind of trust. I shared with you earlier when I gave you some of the readings for this morning that Unity has a unique approach to the Bible. And the approach that we have is a mystical and metaphysical approach. We do not take the Bible literally. We do not take it as the inerrant, infallible Word of God. We see the Bible and all of the stories and characters and elements of it in a mystical and symbolic way that give us a bit of a sense of our own soul's journey and unfoldment. And we suggest that when we read some of these stories or we think about some of these stories, that we try to see ourselves in the stories, that we try to see how each character and each element of the story might speak to an aspect of our own soul's growth and unfoldment. That it's not about, the richest part of it is not about an attempt to describe a point in history, but it's really about the soul's unfoldment. I don't know how rational, intelligent, thinking people can take the Bible literally. I truly, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, I just don't get it. It makes me think that clearly they have not read it, that they're taking somebody else's word for it, because if they did read it, they couldn't take it literally. There are so many contradictions in it. Even in the Christmas story itself, there are contradictions. The version that is presented in Luke is different than the version that is presented in Matthew. In one version, we have Mary and Joseph and being in Bethlehem. In another, we have them in Nazareth. In one, we have they're being traced from the lineage of Abraham, and another from the lineage of Adam. It can't be both ways, right? It can't be both ways. So then what is it? I mean, why do we have the versions of the Christmas story that we do? Why were they written the way they were written? I think they were written, first of all, they were written to appeal to different audiences. In Matthew and in Luke, I've already said, there's very different ways of describing the Christmas story, very different ways of describing where it happened, how it happened. And the reason for that is they were written at different points in time, and they were written to speak to a different audience. Any public speaker knows, any teacher knows, you need to know your audience in order to reach them, right? If you're going to really try to help someone, to teach someone, or to influence someone, you need to know something about them. And you need to be able to speak in a way that they will understand and in a way that they will relate to. And yet we're told in these stories of a miraculous birth, of a virgin birth. How many of you believe? Do any of you believe in a virgin birth? I don't believe in a virgin birth. Do you believe in a virgin birth? Unity doesn't believe in a virgin birth. Unity believes that Jesus was born the same way you and I were born. And what to me is so powerful about that is it doesn't require that we leave our brains out in the parking lot, number one. But what to me is powerful about that is that it no way lessens the meaning and the significance of the teachings that came through this person. And I believe there was a person, Jesus of Nazareth. The teachings and the message and the consciousness that came through that person is not dependent upon a miraculous birth. It's more powerful, don't you think? Coming through somebody more like you and me. Would you not agree? It makes it more reachable. It makes it more understandable. The Greeks, the Jews, I believe even in Buddhism, the idea of a miraculous birth is not unique. So why is there this archetype in some of these teachings of a miraculous birth? I think it's a way of saying, this person was really important, right? It's a way of saying, this person was really important. But I think you and I, at the evolution of knowledge and wisdom that we have of the world and of life and we'll just leave it there, of the world and life. Our intelligence and our knowledge realize that we don't have to have that to grasp the significance of the concepts of the teachings that were given through that individual. There is on my bookshelves, I can't tell you how many different books written by Bishop John Shelby Spong I have, either at home or in my office. Bishop Spong was an Episcopalian bishop, wrote over 20 books with titles such as Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalism. I gotta love anybody who writes a book like that. Or Why Christianity Must Change or Die. You know, an Episcopalian priest wrote a book called Born of a Woman. Born of a Woman. And he challenges in that book the doctrine of the virgin birth, tracing it back to the development in the early Christian church. He examines the reasons, scholarly biblical research. He examines the reasons why Matthew and Luke invented the story of the virgin birth. And then he goes on to show how it led to the church's attitudes towards sexuality and sexism that are still prevalent in society today. But here's a powerful point he makes about it. He said, whether or not one believes in the virgin birth is insignificant and trivial when compared to Christianity's greater truths, the ones that really count. And Christianity's greater truths are not the truths of churchianity. Churchianity is a very different thing than Christianity. Although that very word, Christianity today, with Christian nationalism, is a scary thing. And one has to be very careful, I think, very discerning in how one uses the word Christianity today because of the connotation it has now that has nothing to do with what this man, Jesus the Christ, attempted, or at least we think, attempted to teach. The teachings are what matters. The teachings of love. We could just spend our entire life with love one another and do not judge. Have any one of us in this room mastered that perfectly? I know I haven't, and I don't think you have either, and I don't think our viewing audience has as well. We have room for improvement with just that teaching alone. To love one another, to not judge one another. We could take what's called the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes and get rid of everything else. This is just my little opinion. And get rid of everything else and spend lifetimes attempting to really live by those exquisite gifts that I think we can say came through this man, Jesus. So responding to the divine call, a new kind of trust. I rather suspect that Mary and Joseph, however the story really happened, had to practice a different kind of trust, a different way of being. It would have been, on the human level, very understandable for Joseph to just put Mary away, whether she had been impregnated by him or by another man, to just put her away, save face. But according to the story, if even this part of the story is true, he did not do that. He did not do that. But we have in the story, I think, a couple of points that are really just beautiful mystically. We have in this story, let me go back to how I wrote it here so I don't miss it. We have in the story, in the book, the way it's told in Luke, we have the angel appearing to Mary and telling her what's going to happen. Mary, did you know? It's like what happens to us when we have a flash of insight about something good, something new, some change that could happen to us and through us. But our human mind just doesn't quite know how to grasp it. Does that make sense? Have you ever had that happen where somehow you just really had a sense that you were being called into something very different than what you had known before? And usually, I think in our humanness, there is a certain element of disbelief about that, and there's probably a certain amount of fear, right? And in the story, we're told that the angel says to Mary, "Fear not, what's about to happen to you is good." I think that's a powerful message to us as well. At those times when we feel like there is a pulling on our soul into a bigger life than we have known before, for us to recognize and to lean into this idea that we're not alone in that journey. That, yes, maybe there's some fear in there, but we don't have to succumb to that fear. And that what wants to come through us is something incredibly good. That, I think, takes a new kind of trust, a different kind of trust than we usually experience. I think the kind of trust that we often experience operates more on the human level, the trust between people, the trust of what our minds can see and what we can evaluate and what makes logical sense to us. And all that has its place. But I think there's also a different kind of trust, a trust in that mystery that we cannot always explain, but somehow we recognize it. Somehow we resonate with it. Nod your head if you relate to what I'm saying here. A fluttering of recognition. In Matthew, there's the angel appearing to Joseph, telling Joseph, "Don't be afraid. that something good is about to happen. He's contemplating the idea of divorcing her privately, which would have been totally understandable in that culture and in those days. But in a dream, he's told to do it differently. In a dream, he's told to do it differently. A new kind of trust. Have you ever had something appear to you in a dream that you knew was what you might call a divine message? Have you ever had that happen? Have you ever had it happen to you where it wasn't a dream, but it was a nightmare? That was mine. And that was ministry. Mine was a nightmare. It wasn't a dream. It was like, I don't think I want to do that. And what you push down has a way of popping back up in a very fierce sort of way. A new kind of trust, I think, requires us to pay attention in a sharper way, in a keener way. It is to recognize that we are more than just these physical bodies. We are more than just our minds. We are more than just the things that have happened to us or the things that we have already learned or the things that we have. That all of that exists within a larger context of who and what we are. And when we get that, we stop being afraid to respond to that divine call. We're able to be more like Mary, doing what was hers to do, like Joseph, making the choice that he made without having all the guarantees on the front end of taking those first steps. A new kind of trust. A new kind of trust. I can easily believe that Joseph would have been visited by an angel in a dream. I can easily believe that Mary could have and was visited by an angel in her moment of worry and confusion, because I believe that there are aspects of life that don't match up easily and logically and predictably to the things that we can measure. I think it was Einstein who said, let me see if I can find my quote in here because I think it's an important one. Einstein said to have kept a sign in his office that read, "Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts." Let me repeat it. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. It's the divine mystery. It's the divine mystery. It's why we in this teaching begin to increase our powers of discernment to recognize that we are multisensory beings and we have other ways of receiving information, other ways of recognizing what is ours to do and what is the divine call. How many of you are familiar with the author Gary Zukav? I think quite a few of you are. He writes about this idea that fits in here that we are multisensory beings. And in order to experience this new kind of trust, I think we have to recognize that we are multisensory beings. And when we recognize that we are that, then we pay attention to life and life signals in a sharper, keener, more discerning way. And we find when we do that, doors open, opportunities open. We find that we are in the right place at the right time in ways that we go, how in the world did that happen? But yet it happened. Gary writes this, "A multisensory human is not limited to the five senses. The five senses together form a single sensory system. The object of detection of that system is physical reality. That was sufficient and appropriate for our evolution until this point. Now we are developing a second sensory system. That second system is intuition, multisensory perception. You resonate with the idea that you are more than a mind and a body. You are a soul. Your soul is that part of you that existed before you were born and will exist after you die. From this multisensory perspective, you can see your life in the context of a larger unfolding picture that includes experiences that occurred before you were born. You can see from this larger perspective that your life is attempting to lead you in the direction your soul wants you to move toward greater awareness and freedom. Multisensory perception is realizing the experiences in your life are not random. They are purposeful and meaningful. Each one holds enormous potential for the expansion of your consciousness. Each one is tailored exquisitely for you. Every circumstance you encounter is the best circumstance possible for your spiritual growth, given the wisdom of the choices that you've made. And every circumstance serves equally all involved. Mary, did you know? No, she didn't. Wendy, do you know? Only partly. Rena, do you know? Only partly. Mike, do you know? Only partly. The element of resting in the trust, doing the work that is yours to do, healing where you need to heal, growing where you need to grow, doing the work that is yours to do, but knowing that there is something beyond what you can see right now. And what is beyond what you can see right now is even better than what you've already experienced to this point. A new kind of trust. Do you think that might be important given where we are in our world today? I do. I look at the beautiful exhibit, Lift the Sky. The artist Julie Weaverling will be here later on today to talk about the story of this. But its birth is an attempt to help us, I think, remember the goodness that exists within us, between us, and all around us, to trust in that, to trust more in the goodness of each other, and to do what we can to bring that forth, to give voice to that, to encourage that, to support that. So just a few ideas in closing here. A new kind of trust, to me, means that we awaken from thinking of ourselves as only human, as only two-dimensional beings, to truly multisensory beings capable of intuiting and receiving and knowing and resonating with things that cannot be counted, but things that count. That we realize we are more than these physical forms, that we are more than this wonderful mind that we have, that we are infinite, eternal consciousness behind all of that, behind all of that. That is to live with a new kind of trust. And with this new kind of trust, I think we pay attention to our dreams. We ask of them, what do they mean? What message might they carry? I'm not saying every dream you have is a dream with a message, but I am saying it's worth exploring them. It's worth asking, what's going on here? What's going on? It means that we pay attention to what we might call coincidence or synchronicity or chance. And we don't just dismiss it. We kind of inquire of it. We have an open-hearted curiosity about it. Where might it be leading me? Is it inviting me into a new dimension of my life? Mary, did you know? Mary, did you know? And to know that this journey of our soul, of this unfolding, is, especially I think at the beginning when we really start to go into it more deeply, I think there's two things about it. At least in my life, there have been two things about it. One is that it tends to be awkward. It tends to be difficult to know how to talk about it. It tends to feel a little uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, right? Think about how you feel when you go to a party and you don't know anybody. It's a little bit like that, a little awkward, a little unfamiliar until you kind of maybe mingle around or kind of find your way a little bit, and then it begins to feel a little less awkward. And it also, I think, can be a little messy, a little messy, or perhaps a whole lot messy. What we're talking about is the birthing of our soul, the rebirthing of our soul, if you will. And if you have ever witnessed a live birth, you know it's messy. It's messy and it's potentially dangerous. It needs love and nurturing. So I want to leave you with the thought that whatever has happened before, what wants to happen next is even better than what has happened before. That there is something wanting to be birthed in and through you that is incredibly good and is uniquely yours. Namaste.